Good. Good afternoon, Durham. Welcome to another episode of Durham Unplugged Season 2. I'm your host, Sterling Lee, and this is just a chance for you to meet your local leaders in a less than formal setting. Today, I have a very special guest. I have MPP Jennifer French with me. Jennifer, how are you doing?
I can't complain.
You
I'm
can't
doing pretty
complain at
well.
all in today's day and age. I'm sure there's some complaints.
I could. I'm choosing not to.
Good answer.
You
Good
know,
answer.
I have to say that as we're all kind of looking at the nice weather that seems to be consistent now, and some of us are fortunate enough to be kind of in this groove of whatever we're in now. That I'm looking forward to spending some time outside in the summer and seeing if I can distantly connect with some of my family and
So is that the first thing you're going to do?
just
Like, let's say level 3 is actually today, so it's a good conversation piece. But what is like the first thing you can't wait to do? For me, example, I can't wait to go to the theater, and I probably won't probably for another few months, even though they're opening. But what's like the first thing you can't wait to do?
something that I look forward to is live theater. That's something that I love and appreciate. I had the opportunity. Um, I'm a Mervish subscriber, like I have regular seats up in the nosebleeds.
Yep.
Um, but I had the opportunity to see Hamilton, which was really special. And
Yes.
and I was like, and then COVID. So that was a pretty significant high to go out on.
So
So
my I have the inverse experience with that in that just as COVID was starting, like that weekend where things were shutting down, my tickets were for that Sunday. So as of this Saturday, Mervish was like, hey, we're still gonna try and it won't be as packed. And then by Sunday they had to close everything down. So literally the day of COVID started, my Hamilton tickets went to the ether. And I've been a fan of pretty much since like 2015. I wouldn't say like right when it began, but as things were kind of ramping up. So I've been listening to the soundtrack and I was like, I couldn't wait to see Hamilton. And now I don't know if I'll ever see it again in my lifetime because it's a very hard ticket to get.
I know how fortunate I was to have that opportunity. But uh, anyway, actually, it was interesting. I was of course not able to see it in New York, but I did some of my education in the States,
Mhm.
and one of my one of my schoolmates that I did musical theater with. Mandy Gonzalez, she went on to do special things on Broadway, and she was one of the sisters in Hamilton in the original. So it was
That's
not the
good.
original. Yeah. So she's not on the original cast recording, but she played it on Broadway, and it's just, it's that, the friend of a friend
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing.
You're 10. You're
My
you're two
connection
away
is
from Lynn, right? You're two away from Lynn. So you actually studied musical theater in school.
no,
Okay.
sorry. I made it sound way fancier. It was high school and it was a semester class, and yeah,
That's
a little
awesome
bit
though.
of music and yeah, that kind of stuff.
And what did you do? What did you think of the Toronto cast? Was it as? I mean, I'm assuming you saw the Disney Live Hamilton production that was just on recently. Was the Toronto cast pretty good?
The Toronto cast was excellent. I mean, it's a traveling cast, of course, but it's so different seeing it in person because you're in that space and you have the audience reaction and that sense of community, which I don't know when we will be able to next have that, which is a big part of what I am hopeful for, that one day we can all kind of have that coming together and supporting the arts. But it really was special watching it up close and personal and seeing
Um, and what is your
seeing
favorite
the expression. And
what is your favorite musical of all time then, or top three? Because you mentioned you're a Gemini and don't like being put on the spot for picking the favorite.
okay, I hadn't mentioned that since you started recording, so thanks for reminding me.
That was pre-show
Um,
talk.
yeah, uh-huh. What don't you want me to say? This. Okay. Um, I don't know that I've got a favorite musical. I've had the opportunity to be in a few, so those are favorites. Like
Well, we're gonna start
locally,
right there. What musicals have you been in?
uh, it's so funny. This is not where I thought that this conversation would
Neither did
go.
I. This is the show. It's loosey goosey. We just go down tracks.
Uh, so I was a teacher in Durham region, and
Okay.
I started teaching in Whitby and then Pickering and then in Oshawa. And during that time, I got connected with some folks who were musical theater enthusiasts locally. So I did some auditions, and and was in the chorus, was in the background cast of Annie at Oshawa Little Theater, and that was fun.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was shared, it's sort of a shared lead cast for the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which was at
Yeah.
Whitby
My
Courthouse
friend did that show as well.
in Whitby.
No, sorry. He did it in Sarnia. He has a
Oh,
theater company
okay.
in Sarnia. So yeah.
Okay. I was wondering if maybe we were connected and just how many of my skeletons you could find. And actually, to my knowledge, the only person who remembers seeing that show and thinks they remember me in it was Mayor Don Mitchell. So
Of
other than
course.
that,
Of
that
course.
one's buried. And then I was in a show up in Port Perry, Breaking Up is Hard to Do, which was just a fun musical romp with the limited plot line, but it was fun.
A lot of doo-wop singing, I'm assuming.
Yeah, actually, and I played a ridiculous caricature, which um, I'm grateful that these things aren't filmed. That's
I
all.
was gonna ask whether we can go on the World Wide Web and find you on these at all, but I'm guessing you've now buried them all. I had to go to the dark web to find it.
No, then there's nothing wrong with them. They're a little bit cheesy, which
Of
I have
course.
that tendency. So it's yeah.
I
It,
still
it,
think
it
for me, top three would probably still be Les Mis, and then Hamilton, and then probably Miss Saigon is probably my third favorite.
I love Miss Saigon.
Yeah,
Love.
it's really it's kind of I would say I was gonna say underrated, even though it's been on Broadway for like 25 years, but like I just find it's never on anyone's top list. But the songs are banging and the story's kind of tragic, and yeah, I really related to that
It
one.
was it was one of my favorites, and that when you said, I was like, oh, I should have said that one. Yeah, it's the power of reminder. I years and years ago had the chance to do a student trip to parts of Europe, and when I was in London, the leaders the leaders were going and getting tickets for things, and so I kind of tagged on with them and ended up buying, the last ticket in the theater, and saw a few things, Starlight Express and
Oh
saw
man,
Les Mis. But we had proper tickets to Miss Saigon. Like that it was so awesome, and I had really enjoyed learning the music before I went. But years later in university, I had the chance to do some field research and went to Vietnam. And so I had all of that music in my head, and just not to say that that's a fair foundation to build on, but it is a bit of a favorite. Yeah,
and
you're
Starlight
taking me
Express is one
back.
of those low key Lloyd Webber ones that is about roller skating, if I'm not mistaken.
And that one, I don't really know what it was about. I just remember the music and the lights, because my seat was the one that it's like $5 and it's behind the pole.
Yeah.
so, so yeah, I didn't see that one
Um,
up close and personally.
well, I don't think you missed much, to be honest. But, anyways, that was musical talk with Sterling and Jennifer. I saw on your Wikipedia, because you have a Wikipedia entry, which I'm sure you knew, but you taught in Japan for a few years, and I think I read somewhere
Yeah.
that you're somewhat fluent in Japanese.
Mm, I I can manage in Japanese. I could always get myself into trouble and usually out of. But that's the extent of it. I've had the opportunity. So yes, in answer to your question, I lived in Japan for a few years. I finished university, and my my undergrad was going to be pre-med. I started in pre-med, and then I defected into general biology, and kind of took some extra courses to have the grades to graduate,
Right.
and didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. So I decided to travel and see a part of the world I hadn't. And I went to Japan to teach English, and thought if I hate it, it's a year. And if I love it, I don't have anything pressing to come back to. And I ended up staying for 3, and I had a wonderful time. Really enjoyed the teaching, which led to teaching.
Becoming a teacher,
Uh,
right?
yeah. And I loved learning the language. So I did very well to self-study, but also I like to meet folks, and I did well with the language. fluent is really kind.
Sure.
Um, and then in this role, it has been random. I've had the opportunity to actually give some remarks in Japanese, and I had to give a speech. No, I didn't. I was supposed to give a toast, and somehow it got miscommunicated, or my office misunderstood, and we thought that I was to bring greetings, like
Right.
from the from the party kind of thing. No, they really just wanted me to sort of say
Raise the
something nice
glass.
and and cheers. So I ended up with a speech bringing greetings, and it was a little bit in English and then in Japanese. So there are some people who were there that night, and it I guess made the impression because no one expected that to come out of my mouth. But I had
Right.
practiced it, like I couldn't have done it on the fly. But anyway,
Do
so
you
yeah,
find you have
that.
do you have an ear for picking up languages, or like you really had to put the nose to the grindstone and kind of learn it?
No, I would say I've been fortunate that I have an ear. I was a core French teacher for years. I have a base there. I don't have a fluency.
Hmm.
I lived as I said, I lived in the States for a couple of years during high school, and took 4 years of Spanish. Like I appreciate language. I appreciate communicating, and it has come easily. I don't necessarily have the levels to show for it, but
Right.
yeah. And I've
Now
got to
you
be careful that I don't mimic people when I'm talking to folks with accents. My ear will pick it up and start to.
and then you regurgitate it back, right?
And I'm have to be careful not to, because it's not cool, not intentional either. Anyway,
Now you mentioned a few times you went to school in the States. Which state, what city?
um, so I grew up in Ontario, and then my dad's job took us to Los Angeles County, so in Southern California, just outside of Los Angeles, actually in the Santa Clarita Valley. The TV show doesn't paint it the way that I remember it.
Got it.
And it has grown a lot since I was there, but I was just there for 4 years of high school, and then came back and went to Queens, and kind of left my family in the States. They've moved around a bit and come home. But yeah, in Southern California. So it was an interesting time, and I really appreciated it while I was there. I always felt like a bit of a tourist. We took advantage of, you know, the tourist opportunities and the beautiful landscape of California. Have some friends I keep in touch with, so it was kind of a neat part of shaping my experience and appreciation for things. So
It's kind of like a reverse, or like a knockoff 90210, because didn't they go from like Michigan to Beverly Hills, and you went from
I,
Ontario to like Santa Clara? Like, that's like
yeah.
a poor
So
man's.
if your takeaway is anything to do with my life is like 90210, like we need to start over. No,
No, it was not like that at all. You did not have a Luke
no,
Perry to pine over.
my high school, actually Saugus High School, which last year was in the news for school shooting, which was
Oh no.
very, yeah, challenging for that community, of course. But Saugus High School was a converted dairy farm. So all that to say, we
Just
weren't
like
fancy.
West Beverly High from 90210.
Is that true?
No, no, sorry.
Oh,
I'm just teasing.
oh,
So,
funny.
let's talk about your journey into politics. So you taught for a few years, and then I think you were elected in 2014, if I read that correctly. And what made you? What was your calling? Did you always want to be? No, I mean you took biology in university, so I'm assuming you didn't always want to be a politician.
No. Um, no, I had never thought of politics formally, frankly. It wasn't in my family. It wasn't really in my household. Not entirely sure how my parents used to vote back in the day, honestly, like
Yeah.
in terms of partisan politics. Um, I look back though, and I see that there was a foundation that I've easily built on. You know, we had a small community church that we went to. The idea of being a part of a community. My mother was in education and worked with children that had vulnerabilities, and there was a lot of fairness that I was aware of growing up. And then when I was teaching, especially teaching grade 7 and 8, and in the south end of Oshawa, and also when I was teaching in Whitby, I was working, like all my kids went to White Oaks.
Hmm.
And so like I had seen in my teaching career inequity and challenges to access, kind of the next steps. And so when I was teaching grade 7 and 8 and helping them pick their courses, and, helping them imagine all of the things they could possibly be. And then you start to realize, well, those jobs may not exist in this country, or, okay, the cost of travel to where you'd need to go, or access to education, that there were barriers, and not to say that couldn't be overcome, but you start to realize that, children can imagine themselves being at that, achieving a goal. But if the pathways are not clear for them to get there, um, that's not right or fair. So that's when I started really realizing that, I can sell them on this dream, but if they can never afford education in this province, if they can never, if those jobs are outsourced and don't exist here, it started to kind of propel me to get involved in the making the difference side, or
Hmm.
the equity work. And I was involved with my local union. It was around the time, you may remember, the government of the day, um, Bill 115, and kick the teachers in the teeth. And I thought, this is so wrong. Flash forward, it was wrong.
Right, right, right.
um, but that sort of awoke a number of us, and I got involved with my local union, and on that fight against Bill 115, got connected with different folks in the trade union movement, and you realize that whether it's a trade union movement or whether it's grassroots organizations, there are a lot of people who are doing heavy lifting that's very sincere to, ensure people have safe workplaces or living environments. And I started to recognize I had a lot in common with those activists and voices, and got more involved, and realized that I was surrounded by, by a lot of New Democrats. And I thought,
Right.
this is resonating with me. And then when the election was on the horizon, there was an opportunity that, someone was saying, well, should I run? I said, I don't know, should I? And I thought, why would I say that? Where did that come from? But it came from a place of frustration. There was so much that you could see that wasn't right or fair, that needed, someone to push or to hoot and holler or whatever was required to make the difference. As it turns out, a little more than than just those things
Right.
to make change. But then it was a quick turnaround, because I remember that the conversation I had that Saturday morning at a community meeting, where I realized that there wasn't a candidate at that time. And I was like, well, should I run? And I thought, where did that come from? From that day until being sworn in the legislature on the other side of a provincial election was 4 months and 1 week.
Oh my
And it was,
goodness.
yeah, it was, my feet never hit the ground, right? So through that process, and then I was formally nominated like 1 month before election day. uh, it went, when it came time to decide whether or not to run again, I remember sort of sitting myself down and having a conversation,
Yeah.
like,
I'm going to take
you know,
time
you
this
know,
time.
now you know what this is. Now you know what you're getting yourself into. But you're not getting yourself into it, right? You're getting your community into this,
Mhm.
right? You're getting your community into the conversation, into the into that legislature. So it was an easy decision, but I still thought I should think about it this
Yeah, I'm
time,
going to take a
because
breath and just shoot it out, right? Now, what's been the most surprising
yeah, it was.
politician that you find? So it's been about 6 years. What's
Sorry.
been, sorry, yeah. What's been the most surprising part of your political journey so far? So you've been in the legislature for 6 years now. What's been the thing that surprised you the most?
Mhm. Um, I don't know that it's a surprise, but like it is remarkable how in 6 years you don't have 2 days that are the same. That there are some patterns, but there is so much that is dynamic, ever changing as it needs to be. Um, that never fails to disappoint. It's always interesting, always exciting, sometimes stressful, but inspiring, and that's not surprising, but I'm grateful for those pieces of it. But it has never let up. You don't get into a groove, so to speak, for longer than about 2 minutes. um Surprising, I think when I first was elected and I was headed into the legislature, the building feels too big for you. It feels too the history and the weight of the place and the traditions of it and all of that, um, you do have that conversation with yourself around whether or not you belong. Um, and then when I got into the room and recognized, because you're worried about your qualifications, I don't come
Always.
from politics. I haven't been a public speaker my whole life. Well, education, yes,
Right.
I guess so. Um, but then you get there and you hear the voices in the room and you recognize that, part of the strength of our system is that room, the chairs are filled with different people from different, not just perspectives and communities, but hopefully different backgrounds, different journeys. We need to see more of that.
Yep.
We're seeing more since this last election, at least I see it on our benches, and I'm grateful to see that growth, because it pushes, it challenges, it strengthens. But I realized when I heard other people, I thought, well, hold on, they've been here for 30 years. They're not any more qualified than I am. That doesn't sound very polite. I recognize that, everyone does belong there, as long as they're there to represent their communities. So that was a pleasant surprise, I guess. I thought I was
Sure.
really gonna, what's that, imposter syndrome kind of thing, but
Oh, trust me. Yeah, I didn't realize I had imposter syndrome like pretty much my entire working career. I didn't know they had a name for it till I think it was like maybe a year ago I read about it and I was like, oh my God, that's me. That's what I have. And it's just like this thing where it's just like you constantly like underestimate yourself and don't think you have the qualifications. But especially in politics, though, it's supposed to be like, I've always had an idealized version of democracy, and it just should be an every man or every woman, excuse me, type thing where it's just like anybody off the street can do it as long as you connect with your constituents and you represent your constituents. Then it shouldn't matter if you're a lawyer or it doesn't matter, right? So I've always liked that part. I mean, ultimately my career before politics, I was in technology sales. I was a salesman, right? So here I am, and I think I'm doing a pretty good job. So I think it
well,
speaks well that we all have different, or we're starting to see more different backgrounds.
yes, and we need to challenge ourselves to ensure that we're inviting people into the candidacy, into the nominations process, and encouraging people, because when folks look at that room and they don't see themselves, they imagine that there are barriers. There are barriers, but they
Of course.
also think, well, I can't get there, or I don't, or I shouldn't. And the reverse of that is the case, especially, I mean, as we're looking around the world right now, and certainly, looking in Canada, we are recognizing that we need to have some of these bigger conversations around, you know not just our history but our future, and what we're going to learn from the history, so that we can build that stronger future that is equitable, and what that looks like. And from reconciliation and anti-Black racism, anti-oppression work, all of that has to not just be. Right now we're in a time where everyone's talking about it, so it'll be, I think, exciting to have the action and then the accountability, where we're further down the road, we can look back and say, oh good, we did actually put these things into place to make things, better. So I think it's a pretty massive journey we're all on right now, but the legislature certainly is right in the thick of it. Not just like, there's so much potential there, because the legislature is a massive system,
Right.
and it's, I mean, any system, it needs to be shaken to make sure it can still stand, and
Hmm.
it needs to be reevaluated, and we need to ensure that it is what it is supposed to be, which is the people's house. So
Yeah, you mentioned like the movement right now, and it's appropriate. Like it's time that we start having these conversations, because like the way, like I'm sure you see it on social media all the time of people being like, well, why should I change? Like these, it's everything under the sun to just to halt change and to halt movement. And it's just like, it's just this giant pendulum was one way for so long. And now it's finally, I think it really kind of started with Me Too, a lot of the Me Too movement, those stories coming out. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but it should be, because I can't even imagine what some of my female colleagues, friends, family members had to go through, because people didn't feel comfortable talking about it because they felt they wouldn't be believed, or there'd be that kind of conversations. Now, the LGBTQ plus community, the Black community, I'm glad the pendulum has swung the other way. We're challenging everything now, because that's the only way we're going to truly break down these systemic problems that we've had for generations, is by having these conversations. So it is it is refreshing to see someone who's noticed the world around her and be like, yeah, like it's a good start, but we're not even close to being where we need to be, right? And acknowledging that, hey, let's start bringing people up along the way.
Well, and obviously, I mean, people can guess about my journey, and they're probably right, in terms of how I've been able to put one foot in front of the other, relatively barrier free. And I'm grateful for that. But I take inventory of that. And you have the opportunity at each life stage, when you're in university, which of itself is an opportunity that others don't have. But when you look around and you compare journeys with your peers, and you realize the inequity that others
Right.
have faced. And then when you are a classroom teacher and your ducklings come from such diverse home lives, and then beyond, and it's not just giving them all the same tool, it's ensuring that they have the tool that is the right tool for them to build something, for the next stage. And I think that that's part of the human condition, is you're supposed to kind of take stock of where you are and grow from there. And I think a lot of people are I mean, I'm oversimplifying this,
Of
but
course.
I think a lot of people are very nervous, or fearful, or resentful, or whatever the feelings are about, the cracks in our systems, and in many of our familiar, whether it's traditions or kind of our story, that they're fearful that it's all going to crumble. And I think that, it's not my line, but the cracks are how the light gets in, right? And I think where we go from here, what history we learn from, it's not, people are very afraid of that, because they identify with their stories and their childhood and their upbringing, and that's important. But then what, right?
Right, right, right.
What do we
You can't
want
just
for
cling to
people's
that forever.
childhood? Well, and what do we want for the children today? What do we want their childhood to look like, right? So it's not just making space, it's making meaningful room for change. And I don't know, I change is uncomfortable, but it's also it's necessary, it's exciting. um
No, agreed. And what do you like in your time as, an MPP, what's the one thing that you want done above all else? Like if I were to just say like this is the most important issue to Jennifer French as an Ontario legislator, like what do you think would be that one issue for you? You mentioned education. That's obviously a very, that could be the silver bullet for a lot of these issues. But what do you, like, what's the one thing you want to fix in your time?
okay, those are two different questions. What
Fair
needs to be
enough.
fixed, or what I don't think I have the ability to fix what needs to be fixed, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that work along with those who are going to be part of that. And I think housing is something that, again, not to oversimplify, but I do believe that if everyone had, a roof over their head and a place where they felt safe, that their mental health challenges would have a safe space to be, handled differently. That, there's that protective, like if people had that continuity of safe, that would make a huge difference. People could make plans, they could, put down roots, they could, get well, they could get connected with services. And when we don't have that, when we have so many people, whether it's families in the suburbs or street involved youth, when people don't know if they can pay their bills or if their home will continue to be their home, we see a lot that spins from that. So I think the basics, and that is, first thing has to be that uh, predictable sense of home.
Mhm.
um, and that is something that I know our counselors, not just locally but across Durham region, like everybody is trying to figure that out. We're looking at it provincially, whether that's tiny homes, whether it's, transitional care, like it's all of these pieces have to fit for folks. um, and everything connects to that. The mental health initiatives connect to, to that, a basic level of stability. I think then you can build on, and folks can make plans. um I don't know, fair access to services. That's a broad thing. That's something in our office, right? Like people come in, and whether it's an ODSP or OW, or whether they're dealing with family responsibility office and custody issues, like people are just, there's so many obstacles to having that access to service, because through the years those stores have sort of been closed, the programs have been ended, or they've been dialed back, and people are just struggling with things that they shouldn't, right? That there is a government responsibility, whether, politically, if people want to argue about whether or not it should be their responsibility, at this time it is. So this service should be what is agreed is needed. And it's a challenge for a lot of people.
No, of course. And it's something like, housing is such a key one that I think a lot of us who are privileged enough take for granted. Like, yeah, of course I have a house, I have a roof over my head. Like that should be a no-brainer. But obviously, to your point, especially in Oshawa, you're seeing a lot of people who don't have that security and the stress that comes with, or it's such a precarious situation right now that could be gone at any moment. I can't even, I'm fortunate enough to be able to, if I have to move, I can just move, right? And a lot of people don't have that privilege. So it's a really good point that
it's it's not it's not only a matter of those who are homeless, or who are couch surfing, or they're sort of invisible homeless, that they're perhaps sheltered, but it's precarious and changing. It's also a lot of people who work in hair salons, or work in the service industry, and are not able to make a wage and bring home enough money to pay their bills, that the cost of rent, it's that house poor, just at the level of an apartment, if they can find one. And when you don't have that choice or those options, and you end up with substandard safety and substandard living conditions, because if you're unhappy, move out. There's somebody else to take it, because there's such a need for housing. And then you also hear from community members who have 2 jobs and 2 kids, and they live in a home that they can't afford because someone took a pay cut, or because, of course, now with COVID, it is all uncertain for a lot of people with employment, with income, with being able to pay the rent, pay the mortgage, pay the bills. So we're all on pretty uncertain uncertain footing right now. So we'll have to kind of watch as that unfolds, and do our best to support people as we go.
okay, wow, this is not what this podcast is supposed to be. This is supposed to be loosey goosey, but we got into some issues, which I'm glad. Honestly, like I don't have any sort of agenda when I invite guests on. It's just conversations, and you seem to have really strong opinions on really key things. So I'm glad we kind of went down that track. I don't want to take up too much of your time. We're actually close to our time now, but I mean, just for the sake of asking, because we had alluded to this, what is your favorite movie?
Come on, man.
Or what are your top 3 favorite movies? Yes.
For the folks watching at home, Sterling set it up with, is there anything you don't want me to ask? And I said, don't ask me my favorite movie. So,
oh no! I thought you said. I thought you said you were. I didn't think I was like, don't ask. I thought you were just like you didn't have an answer for it.
I know, and I still don't. I've had half an hour to chew on all sorts of things, but not favorite movie. I don't know that I've got a favorite. I've got a few kid classics that I bring up happy family memories, and
what are those movies?
Well, I grew up with a brother who has always been into, fantasy and gaming and all of that. And so I grew up watching the X-Men on TV, and I grew up with Star Wars and all. Right?
Yeah, I'm not that. I've now changed my ringtone to that theme song, because that's a banging theme song. Like you hear that guitar riff, and I get excited, and I don't know why I get excited.
I was rogue for Halloween a few years ago when this started coming in.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
did you speak with a southern drawl as well?
I can. There's the mimic ear. Yeah. No, I lived in Texas for a little bit too. I was a waitress at the Outback in Texas.
Was that true? I can't actually go to Texas because all my exes live there. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. That was a dad joke. I apologize.
Fair. Yes, it was true. So I picked up a couple of withdrawals, but no, I'm not going to use them.
No,
And
of
no.
course not.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for favorite movie. I tend to like series because once you invest, you get right into it. Like, Lord of the Rings, but the extended versions, like, because I don't understand how anybody could watch the sort of theatrical releases now and not know all of the backstory, not see it
Because
all.
we don't have 5,000 hours at our disposal. Well, I guess we do now.
5,000 hours. It's 14.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
it
funny
can
you
be done.
mentioned
My
that.
brother and I do.
I just rewatched them, all three of them, like the full releases,
Yep.
just this past weekend, actually. So, yeah, I don't like. I'm
I
still
didn't know this. I wasn't trying to just, between Miss
no, of
Saigon
course.
and the X, we're just on the same wavelength.
Oh, I'm full. I don't know if it's nerd or geek, but I'm like absolute. Like it's, my comic book collection is there, and
Ooh.
I'm heavily into comics and that whole like nerd culture, and it's like I always argue that I should have been born like a decade later because it seems like this generation of kids have embraced their nerddom and like people play board games all the time now, whereas like that wasn't really so much my life growing up, but I'm not complaining. It's just one of those things where I think I was either a generation too early or a generation too late in some cases.
I don't know
So,
whether I've been a bit of a dork, but I've been a nerd or nerd adjacent.
right.
But if you come from a tech background, you could have some geekishness. I'm not really sure. And if I'm name calling and being offensive, I apologize.
No.
But
It's the colloquialisms that we use, right? And is there any kind of TV series or anything you're watching right now?
no.
So what's occupy?
Oh,
Is it just work for COVID, like in the COVID life? Because I find I have a lot of time now on my hands.
I don't have any time. That's not to say that I don't find time.
Right.
I work in my basement and then I come upstairs at the end of the day and you're like, oh, look, it's already after dinner time. And then, or it was that way, especially at the beginning, it slowed for a bit and it's has been back to that level. I haven't watched much TV. I kind of try to sit out on the front porch or on the back deck and just kind of stare at the trees and take inventory of what just happened,
Right.
process the day. I'm caught up on the 100.
Oh, is that a good show?
Is it the 100 or the 100? Anyway,
Right.
yeah, I've got that little bug in the back of my brain that's like, what if it was the end of the world? Who would I be? Would I be a survivor? Would I be a leader? Would I be one that would, be axed in the first episode? So anyway, and it's kind of
I think like
post-apocalyptic.
every one of those apocalyptic, there's always like some coward who ends up backstabbing the group to save themselves. And the more I think about it, I think that's me. But don't tell my wife, please don't tell my wife that. Um, we've gone a bit over, and I really appreciate that. So just quickly, is there a restaurant that you want to give a plug to? Because we should be shopping and shopping local and supporting our local businesses. What's your go-to restaurant for takeout?
For takeout, actually for takeout, I consistently been supporting FGF Vegan, which is downtown Oshawa. They have some wicked awesome pizza and different things that I love. But Matilda's, I will be glad to step foot in there and have some of the, like, we've got some good vegan restaurants downtown and Berry Hill. Now that I hear myself say that, I should look and see whether their patio is open and what
Yeah.
they're and how they're doing, because they've got a little back patio that is this magical space that is really, really special. If you have never been deep in the heart of Oshawa, it's just an awesome, awesome little patio.
Well, I'm
So.
definitely going to check that out for sure. And just how long have you been vegan for? I'm always interested about that.
I've had an interesting journey with it. Some years of vegetarian, some years of keto, and completely the opposite. So I've been, seeking. I've been figuring out what works for me, and so it's been about the last two and a bit years that it's been entirely the whole foods plant based. Yeah, so it's been working, and it works with the fact that I'm an amateur backyard gardener.
Ah,
Although I
got
have
it.
not, I've been home, but I've been watering, but my garden has not been interested in
Growing.
producing. It's been a grumpy little garden. So
And is there any kind of
anyway,
key non-vegan dish you miss the most? Is it, steak, ribs? Is there anything kind of you miss?
No. When I smell bacon, that's like some chemical
Yeah,
trigger in your brain, right? But
it's Pavlovian at this point.
oh yeah, bacon and like McDonald's fries, you smell it and you
Yeah.
want it and you don't have a reason to want it. Um, no, not there's not really anything that I miss. I had some actual cheese pizza. I thought it was vegan house cheese, but we read two separate lines and combined those things. There was vegan
Right.
cheese and house cheese. And I was like, oh my God, this is so good. Yeah, I was. Anyway, I don't miss it. I every once in a while, get suckered into calamari if I'm out with a friend and I don't feel bad about it. So
Good. No, you shouldn't. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you online?
they can find me certainly on Facebook. My Twitter is at Jen with two N's K French. Um, Same with Instagram. And yeah, but certainly to reach out to our office at the Kinsted office or Queens Park office if anyone ever has a question, concern, or any of that, and we can direct them to the right place.
And I'll include
And
that
while
information at the bottom of this video as well.
perfect, and our office is kind of in flux like everyone else's, but we've been serving people all the way through, and we'll continue. So not to hesitate to call or shoot us an email.
Perfect. Well, you can reach me at your voice for Ajax, the number 4, and that's on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget to like, subscribe, or comment on the YouTube channel. Jennifer, it's been an absolute pleasure. This went long, and it was an absolute delightful conversation where I got to know you.
I'm a Gemini. I'm a teacher and a politician. And you're giving me the opportunity to talk. You did this to yourself. Sterling.
Yeah, and we talked about musicals and X-Men. I mean, I hit everything I wanted to hit, quite frankly. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time on Unplugged. Thank you.